Hello and welcome to the show. I'm back on F1 2015, carrying on the career mode, following a little bit of a disastrous Malaysian Grand Prix. I do still remain second in the Drivers' Championship, though, as we head to China. A circuit that I'm a little bit indifferent about this track. I do like the sort of the turn 1, 2 and 3 complex. That's really a really cool section of corners, but sort of turn 7, 8 and 9 I don't like quite so much. There is also a very, very long straight, and well, me driving the Ferrari, sure, the Ferrari engine and so on is not bad at all, but it's not quite up there with the Mercedes. So yeah, it's a circuit I don't mind the China circuit, but it's not likely to be one of my best. As I said, I do love this first kind of corner section. It's a little bit of a funny one to get right. You can take a little bit of time to kind of get the hang of it. You end up sort of turning into the first part really rather quickly and kind of gradually slow it down as you go around. But once you get it right, it is an absolutely fantastic sequence of corners. The next one is we've just got a hairpin coming up here that we make sure to get on the brakes. They run the curb quite a lot. You've got to be careful on the power out of that particular turn. Easy to get the car sort of sliding. Now, I really enjoyed the fast section at Malaysia here. I don't quite like this section of corners as much. It's the first part is very, very quick and then kind of slows down through the next part and kind of tightens up as you go. I just can't quite get as much speed out of here as some of the AIs that I am racing. We again have another slightly peculiar, really, really very long turn coming up as we head towards the incredibly long back straight. On this particular lap, I managed to eat a little bit of grass. Yeah, so a never-ending corner until we find the car on this really very, very long straight. As I say, I mean, the Ferrari's not too bad for straight line speed. I was running a relatively low downforce setup on my car because of this very, very long straight, and then you brake ridiculously late. It's probably about 125 meters before the corner, and from 212 miles an hour you get slowed down. Yeah, Formula 1 car brakes, very, very impressive. I kept braking too early for that corner for a while, and until I sort of got the hang of it. And for a practice session, 38.4, I was not too displeased with that. In all honesty, and I didn't end up going quicker. The thing that scared me, though, is that did put me into second, yes, and I was very close to the Mercedes. However, both the Mercedes and Vettel had all done their times on the prime tyres, and I hadn't really been going particularly quickly. I think I did like a 39.8 with prime tyres, so around where Massa is at the moment. I was struggling with the prime tyres. On the option tyres, my car was okay, but you can see they were going as quickly as me with them tyres. I had some concerns that I might struggle a little bit here, so we came into qualifying one. I wanted to try and get through this on the primes. I figured I should be able to get through with these. As you know, the Ferrari is still a pretty good car, even with me struggling a little bit with this car. You can see it's just not the same grip from these as we exit down towards this peculiar corner. It was, again, much like I've done in the previous ones, just trying to save the softer tyres for the later qualifying rounds. Having only a shorter race, you don't have to worry so much about tyres, but if I want to do a couple of runs, or if I botch up a first run, it means I have plenty of new fresh tyres for later. And there's always the possibility of rain going on with these. The first two races have been incredibly wet, so yeah, it was just sort of get a time in with these. Wasn't too concerned with the tyres. Yeah, this lap, it wasn't the most amazing lap as I ran a little bit wide, but it was going to be enough. A 39.7 with these tyres. I'm a second off though what the Mercedes were doing with the prime tyres, which was a little bit of a concern, as we see there. Rosberg in second on the primes with a 38.7. I think Vettel also got through on the primes. It was further down though that things got interesting. The manner of Will Stevens almost got out of Q1, beating Maldonado, Perez and Kvyat. Very nearly made it into the top 15 there, which was certainly surprised me as we were going down there. Alonso finally got his McLaren out of Q1 as well. But yeah, aside from that, there was a mixture of cars trying to get through on the primes, Ricciardo and Vettel and so on. When it came to Q2, there was more surprises as Rosberg went out. that I wasn't really expecting that. He wasn't even messing about with tyres. That was with the option tyres. He did a 140. I don't know what on earth went on for him there. I have absolutely no idea. As he finds himself all the way down in 12th. Again, the two McLarens struggled a little bit. Verstappen was down in 14th. Ricciardo made it through on primes, which was quite a brave thing. I could have done, but I didn't quite trust myself, as I had been struggling a little bit with them tyres, unsurprisingly. Hamilton was at the front with a 37.2. Vettel did a 37.6 as well. So then it came on to the final qualifying session. My first flying lap had been relatively good, a 38.1. I knew that wasn't likely enough to be pole. We'd seen a few cars getting into the 37, so I figured we were going to have to go again. I was doing these sort of two lap run, or if that makes sense. I was doing 2 laps with the 2 flying laps with each sets of tyres, and that was working for me. I was having enough grip. If you try and go for a 3rd lap, they just don't, even if you have enough fuel in the car, they just don't really, you don't quite have enough grip to make it around, so you have to do something really rather special. Yeah, I'd been struggling. I was trying all sorts of different lines through these this sort of fast change of direction. Never quite sure which one was working. On this lap, I got things at the back end started to get away from me as I just dabbed on the brakes. Very nearly ended badly over there. You saw the car kind of moving around, but I was going relatively quick. I was half a second up on my previous best at this time, which would have been a pretty damn good lap time. The long sweeping corner coming onto the straight as well is quite easy to try and get the power down too soon, or try and go sort of too much throttle and get the car sliding about, and then you get yourself into a little bit of trouble. 214 miles an hour as we jump on the brakes and get it stopped for the hairpin. Again, the extra of the hairpin, possible to get the wheel spin going. Not as bad as Malaysia, I found, around here, as the car wasn't moving about as much. I get very wide on the final corner, and we crossed the line. It was only it was a 37. I didn't get into the 37s. It was only a 37.9 though. Yeah, running wide on that final corner. It was not a particularly good idea. Lost some time going over there, but that was the best that I could manage. Amazingly, that put me into 2nd place. Again, cars in the final round of qualifying were not going particularly fast, except for Hamilton. He was at a 37.3, over half a second quicker than me. Yeah, like I said, Vettel was all the way down in 4th, a 38.4. Admittedly, you know, it's still quite close around there, but I almost lucked into a decent grid position in many respects for this one. So it came to race day and things were gloriously sunny for the first time in this career mode. And it was the first time that I hadn't found myself on pole, this time going to the Mercedes of Hamilton. And I was thinking I would probably be struggling against the Mercs. I figured I'd got a little bit lucky almost getting into 2nd place. I thought this was going to be much like we had at Australia. This was going to be a race where I was going to be defending a lot of the time, and I didn't get a particularly good start. Too much wheel spin off the line. Vettel was trying to have a go at getting up the inside, so I had to go and cover him off. Massa sweeped around the outside to take 2nd. However, I wasn't giving up that easily, sticking my nose up the inside through this first corner section, and the Williams ran out of space and couldn't keep his car there, which would put me back up into 2nd, and Hamilton had got a lovely gap already. Hamilton was already, you know, pretty much gone. I ran in a little bit too deep into the hairpin. I was worried about defending from the Williams. I managed to keep said Williams behind. As you can see from the minimap, there was a bit of a kerfuffle further back, which we'll see later on. Yeah, the field got very spread out at the start of this race. At the front though, and you can see the gap that Hamilton's Mercedes was already pulling. I get the back of my car is wiggling around some more as I try to get on the power. Now, I was expecting to have the Williams and certainly the Ferrari and Vettel all over the back of me throughout this race. I was thinking I was going to be defending quite a lot, but to my surprise, that wasn't really the case. While the Mercedes was certainly vanishing off at the front, by the time we came to this long back straight, the Williams had fallen back a little bit. Yes, it had some good straight line speed, of course, sat in the slipstream, was bringing Vettel with him, but he wasn't close enough to have a go at the hairpin. I didn't feel the need to go on the defensive, and as we leave the rather nasty hairpin again, I was making. I was just sort of keeping a nice, safe enough gap back to this Williams on the opening lap that I wasn't really feeling like I had to defend. Again, out of the final turn, I've managed to pull a bit more of a gap. Admittedly, Hamilton was now almost 2 seconds up the road on the first lap. Yeah, he had completely and utterly buggered off, and I was trying my very, very best to catch up to that Mercedes. There was nothing I could do about it around here. But as we can see again, as I come out of the first couple of corners, the Williams was struggling to keep up, and Vettel wasn't really making any progress at getting past him. I was pleasantly surprised, as I may have overcooked the hairpin a little bit on the next time round as well. Yeah, the Massa's Williams just couldn't keep up with me. He was fighting with Vettel and so on, and I would find myself in a bit of, well, sort of no man's land really, going on in second place. Not quite what I expected after not massively impressive qualifying session. As I said, I couldn't do anything about the Mercedes. The Mercedes was just too quick. A couple of times, a couple of laps, I closed a little bit on him. I kept the gap at about 2 seconds for a little while, but it wouldn't be long before he would start making sort of 3-4 tenths of a second a lap on me, especially when I did things like that. Problem is, once you start trying to push harder and harder, trying to catch that very quick car ahead of you, you may make the odd little mistake here and there. I was running wide into turn 1, and that lost me a bit of time. But even when I was pushing this hard, the cars behind really weren't particularly catching up. Then of course we were coming to pit stop time. I'd been struggling with tyres pretty much the entire sort of weekend, if you will. I didn't have particularly good tyre life. I wanted to dive in the pits at the soonest possibility. Now I figured we'd had a big enough gap back to Vettel not to have the Ferrari stack. I did slightly figure wrong after a very poor in-lap on this one, so I was going to end up compromising Vettel a little bit. Unfortunately, I would get out of the pits without sort of tangling with any cars. I actually ended up building the gap to Massa slightly, as I think he got slightly stuck. He had to be held to let Grosjean come past. I also love how the AI didn't let me take control of the car until after it had crossed the white line already. So I didn't get a penalty for that. That was the AI putting my car out over there. Coming on to these prime tyres though, I had very little in the way of grip. It was a little bit of a shock to the system. My options hadn't been in the best condition anyway, I will be honest. But yeah, suddenly coming out on these cold tyres that didn't really have a huge amount of grip, I was in all sorts of problems exploring at the hairpin and slipping and sliding my way through the first few turns. Again, for much of this stint, it was incredibly lonely for my Ferrari. Hamilton would continue to vanish up off the road, and he fared much better on this set of tyres, pulling a much bigger gap. Massa struggled more than me and would be continuing to drop back as I was trying my hardest trying to push the car. Massa would drop so far back. In fact, Rosberg would make a move for third place. I had a really shonky lap on this one, as I was just struggling for grip with these tyres. I just couldn't get that much speed out of the car. You will notice a vehicle appearing from the pit lane there. That was Bottas. The other Williams had an abysmal start to the race, and yeah, I managed to lap him. My concerns in the closing stage were that Rosberg was gradually catching me, but he came from 12th on the grid. He'd done really well to get up to 3rd. However, there was just a huge gap behind me, and while the Mercedes was a much faster car around here, he would run out of laps to really do anything. For a while I did get confused with Bottas's car. I didn't realise it was Bottas initially that came out of the pits, and yeah, I thought it was Rosberg that was catching me rather quickly. It wasn't. It was Bottas with some fresh tyres on his car, and was therefore much quicker than I. You can see I made a couple of silly mistakes and just generally wasn't really liking these tyres. Hamilton would get some 11-second lead by the time we came to the final lap, and having had an incredibly lonely race for pretty much the entire time, the only vehicle that I would see, aside from at the start, was a Williams unlapping itself as Bottas went past with the DRS with much nicer tyres than mine. yeah, perhaps unsurprising it didn't take him long to catch up and get past me. A couple more laps and Rosberg probably would have had me, as he was catching quite quickly towards the end of the race. I was really struggling with the Ferrari, but as was Massa's Williams that fell back through the field very quickly. You can see he's just vanished off the mini-map now. Well, there he is. He's back there. Yeah, Massa's Williams was struggling as well with these tyres. So a second place for me at China. I was pretty satisfied with that, to be honest. The struggles I'd had around here, I hadn't really had until the final stages of the race, with Rosberg gradually catching. Never really had any pressure for second place either, which yeah, is quite a lot better than I was perhaps expecting here. As again, we have Raikkonen smiling on the podium, which is a peculiar thing. Perhaps not such an unpeculiar podium that we have this time, with two Mercedes up there. Vettel, I was slightly curious as to what on earth happened to Vettel. He had been fighting with Massa. Yes, I had slowed him down slightly at the pit stops, but he ended up taking another pit stop and would end up in 9th. Grosjean did well, getting 5th, while Verstappen, that came from well down the order, would come up into 6th. As we saw, Bottas would be a lap down and finish in 20th. Alonso did pretty well, got his car up to 11th. Now, I was curious as to what on earth happened to the Williams of Bottas. He'd been having a pretty good season so far. What happened was, well, me and Vettel were kind of fighting for position. Vettel tried to sort of rejoin the train, spun out the, I think it was Ricciardo's Red Bull, and Bottas would end up in the side of it. That would kill his front wing as he went round the first corner. A rather impatient McLaren would try and squeeze around the outside and very nearly spin the pair of them out. Yeah, the Williams with a ruined front wing and a lap to get back to the pit lane was in a little bit of trouble as all the cars came streaming past. So yeah, that's what happened to Bottas, and that's why he ended up a lap down. And amazingly, the Red Bull didn't really count. It might have been, I think it was Ricciardo, as I said, it might have been Kvyat. I'm not sure. One of the Red Bulls got spun around. That didn't really take any damage. As far as Vettel goes, well, I expected him to have got in a collision somewhere, lost a front wing, and that's why he dived into the pits. Nope, that wasn't the case. He just had enough of these tyres. Admittedly, I disliked these tyres. I was struggling on the prime tyres, but Vettel really had enough and decided he was going to do a two-stop race and came in for some fresh tyres. It didn't really work out for him. He ended up all the way down in 9th. So as far as the championship goes, well, I remain in second place, with Hamilton's got a little bit more of a gap over me. I could really do with him having a duff race or two. Rosberg moving up into 3rd, while Vettel falls to 4th. Grosjean's having a really good, if slightly quiet, championship so far, up in 5th, followed by the two Williams, with Hülkenberg down in 8th. And then we have just the remainder of the smaller points. Both the Saubers have scored points, while Maldonado hasn't scored any, and neither have either of the McLarens or the Manners. Stevens' impressive qualifying didn't really translate into anything in this particular race. To the Constructors' Championship, and is a familiar sight at the top. The Mercedes lead the way from my Ferrari team, ahead of the Williams with Lotus in 4th. Red Bull and Force India joint on points in 5th place there. Yeah, it was a surprisingly decent race at China for me after a few struggles in qualifying and practice. A little bit of a gap opening up to Hamilton, but a couple of my better circuits are coming up soon, hopefully, and I shall be attempting to close the gap. Anyway, that is it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.